Thomas Massie, he referred to Trump's White House as the Epstein administration. Fuck you. How about that? How about fuck you? This assailant was likely some like normal young guy who got radicalized by people like Thomas Massie slandering the president. This hysterical, just nonsense being directed at the president because of sour grapes in the political context, because of resentment, because of just this petty nonsense.
Hey there, folks. Hope you're doing well today. We find ourselves with MAGA trying to make sense of the recent assassination attempt on Donald Trump, especially since the shooter was a former MAGA. And in true MAGA form, today we're looking at John Doyle and what he's doing, blaming Thomas Massie and Marjorie Taylor Greene on radicalizing and turning MAGA against Donald Trump. And again, context matters. Donald Trump did his best to prevent the release of the Epstein files. And it was Thomas Massie who actually worked to have them released. And so in this moment, we see John Doyle not holding the elites accountable, but blaming the person that gave us visibility. Nonetheless, let's see how he connects Thomas Massie and Marjorie Taylor Greene to the radicalization of MAGA in this assassination attempt. But first, let's hear him explain Epstein in very simple words.
The actual story with Epstein is apparently that this guy was, obviously this billionaire. There's shady stuff with how he got his money, obviously involved in intelligence, had connections. The point being, in terms of the sexual stuff, he was like hiring teenage prostitutes, and they were being recruited by Ghislaine Maxwell. They were going to his property, and they were like massaging these old guys and billionaires, and then quite often that would end in like a sexual context. And then when you have these Epstein survivors come back, and I hate even using the word survivor. Epstein, like these victims, that's a very Me Too coded word. The Epstein victims would come back years later and they'd be like, yeah, I started working for this guy when I was like 20. And then I went back when I was like 27 and I got paid. And then now I've decided that I was actually exploited and taken advantage of. And it's like, okay, where are the actual children? You have reports of people who are like teenagers, 16, 17. I don't support that. That's obviously wrong. However.
Okay, so a lot to unpack here. Right? We see him really just minimizing the Epstein allegations, kind of redefining sex trafficking of minors as teenage prostitutes with some massage and sexual context. And who the fuck uses the word sexual context? Not only that, but instead of blaming the perpetrators, these elite who got away with it, he's blaming the victims. And it couldn't be more clear. When he's talking about victims of sex trafficking, he tries to reframe it as, hey, they got paid for it, and then years later, they regretted it. And this is all just complicated personal relationships. That's not how sex trafficking works. And again, sex trafficking of minors. Like, there's this special place in hell for people who carry the water for the elites and blame victims of sex trafficking. But here, let's dive into why it's Thomas Massie's fault that people are turning on Trump.
Anyway, speaking of doing what things are designed to do, we had yet another instance on Sunday of an attempted assassination against President Trump by one of these libtards, one of these libtard sleeper cells who are being activated by these kind of like anti-Trump ecosystems, which are, of course, propagated by the left, but also propagated by many who claim to be on the right, whether that's because of resentment, sour grapes. They all kind of share this anti-Trump agenda, and they all agree fundamentally with the premise that Donald Trump should not be a part of American politics. What they disagree on is the scale, how extreme that ought to go. If you're like a full libtard, you want Donald Trump to be assassinated. If you're, one of these supposed conservatives, but who ultimately finds himself to be anti-Trump, not just in disagreement with Trump occasionally, not even, wanting to work with Trump were he to correct a certain issue or do whatever, literally just like against Trump and finding whatever reason to plug into that. You have this ascendant class on the right who, of course, is like that. This would be your Marjorie Taylor Greenes, your Thomas Massies, people like that.
Okay, so instead of him holding Donald Trump accountable and saying, hey, he promised a lot of things, he failed to deliver on those things, and even the things he promised, like releasing the files, he backtracked on, he attacked his own supporters for wanting those files released, and then when they were released, he was all over them. Instead of him being able to be honest and say, people want him accountable, people are mad at him for tricking them, he instead says, no, they were brainwashed by the left libtards and some extremists on the right. Really just trying to frame people as just brainwashed idiots, which there is a lot of brainwashed idiots and probably a lot in his audience, but let's keep going.
So anyway, we had this case. It was early Sunday morning, actually. It was about 1:30 a.m. And a guy literally drove into the secure perimeter of, obviously, Mar-a-Lago, President Trump's home in Palm Beach, Florida. And he had a gas can and a shotgun. Guy was identified as a 21-year-old named Austin Tucker. Austin Tucker Martin of North Carolina, and I guess his parents reported him missing earlier on Saturday. It is believed at this time that he purchased the firearm while driving to South Florida, and Trump thankfully was not present at Mar-a-Lago at the time. He'd been at the White House by this point, but according to Palm Beach County Sheriff Rick Bradshaw, Martin was spotted by Secret Service. He was ordered to put down his weapons. He aimed his weapons into a firing position, and he was quickly put down by snipers. You idiot. Me when I die for literally nothing. Me when I get one-shotted by shit I'm reading on Twitter about the Epstein files, and then I take up arms at Mar-a-Lago. Trump's not even there. Secret Service is like, hey, can you not? And then I get one-shotted by that, too. Me when I'm destined to be one-shotted because I'm an idiot. This is now the third high-profile assassination attempt on President Trump in just the last, 18 months, 2 years? Family members say Martin was an avowed Trump supporter, Christian conservative, but he had recently complained and become disillusioned about, the economy, and more specifically, he became obsessed with the Epstein files.
Okay, and so there we have it. This wasn't some libtard. He was MAGA, but we really see him continue this theme of they were manipulated into disloyalty. Not they didn't reason their way out of it. Not they felt betrayed so many times over and over and had enough. It's instead they were obsessed, hypnotized, influenced by Instagram reels. But if we're being honest, MAGA has historically always been very easily manipulated. But it's interesting how things have evolved, how MAGA is reading the tea leaves and turning on Trump.
So this is the betrayal, right? This is what these people want to buy into. This is what is captivating the attention span of these people. This idea that maybe they like Trump, they agree with Trump on certain issues, but he betrayed me. He betrayed me. He stuck a knife in my heart because of the Epstein files. Trump's DOJ arrested Epstein in the first place. The only reason we're talking about Epstein in general, it's a national conversation, is because of the efforts of Donald Trump. Every mention of Donald Trump in the Epstein files is something to the effect of Trump being like, hey, this Epstein guy is kind of a creep. Let's get him out of here. Trump worked with law enforcement to build the case against Epstein. We know all of this, but because people keep seeing Instagram reels and tweets and Facebook posts about the Epstein file, they literally are hypnotized into believing that the ultimate antagonist of this whole saga, if not Jeffrey Epstein, is actually Donald Trump. They feel betrayed, and so they take up arms.
And this part is just cope beyond belief, where he attempts to make the claim that every reference of Trump in the Epstein files is Trump calling out Epstein as a creep. What about the party they had where it was just Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein and a bunch of young models? No one else. What about the limo driver that called the FBI after overhearing a phone call between Jeffrey Epstein and Donald Trump? This idea that every reference to Donald Trump in the files makes him a hero could not be further from the truth.
I don't understand how people can really be caught up in this were it not for just delusion and hysteria, which, you talk to the average guy who's really obsessed with this Epstein stuff, that is more or less what you're going to get. Is this kind of, which obviously is why this is the perfect target. The kind of person that would be obsessed with this kind of stuff is, of course, going to be the kind of person who, takes up arms and tries to start killing people. And so that is what this is. It's these Epstein-obsessed people. And these Epstein-obsessed people also that are working in media, working in politics, getting people killed. That's the point. Thomas Massie, he referred to Trump's White House as the Epstein administration. Fuck you. How about that? How about fuck you? This assailant was likely some normal young guy who got radicalized by people like Thomas Massie slandering the president. This hysterical, just nonsense being directed at the president because of sour grapes in the political context, because of resentment, because of just this petty nonsense.
And so now, again, instead of holding the elites accountable, he turns the blame on the people who are actually obsessed with accountability. And again, points to Thomas Massie.
They don't have regard for the details of the story. They don't have regard for why the story would be being discussed right now if we're really supposed to believe that Democrats were sitting on these files for 4 years and then wouldn't actually do anything with it if Trump were really guilty. Now that Trump somehow gets back into office, they're trying to create this problem for him ahead of midterms. And so, yeah, they will pour as much fuel on the fire of the Epstein files as they have to, because they understand there's nothing there. If there were something there, they would have gone after him. There was nothing there with business improprieties, filing documents incorrectly. Nonetheless, they went after him. 34 felony convictions.
Okay, and so again, we just see continuous code. He tries to blame the Democrats for not releasing the files, but then also blames them for releasing the files to get back at Trump when, again, it was a bipartisan vote that released the files, with one of the architects being Thomas Massie, someone on the right. So stop blaming the left for all of this. Libtards have nothing to do with this. And then he finally lands on this idea that evidence that met a burden of proof that demonstrated that Donald Trump was committing fraud was not real, when we've all been able to see what a fraud Donald Trump is. But don't worry, he still has time in this episode to blame trans people.
Then you had the hockey shooter, like, what, a week ago in Rhode Island? This guy, Robert Dorgan, he was this dude who believed he was a woman. He trooned out. He went by Roberta. He shot up a hockey rink in Rhode Island. He murdered his ex-wife. He murdered his son, injured 3 other people. He had a vendetta against his family, I guess, and he killed himself. And then, okay, now we go explore the Twitter account. Avid support for Thomas Massie, Marjorie Taylor Greene, all the usual retard right black pill grifter accounts. He was obsessed with the Epstein files. He was calling for the formation of a third political party with Massie MTG on the ticket. Do you understand, like, what is happening here?
So in that clip, we see him talking about how the shooter was a supporter of Marjorie Taylor Greene and Thomas Massie, but he doesn't until very later in the clip talk about how he was also a Donald Trump supporter.
So this guy was supportive of Trump during the election. Now he's calling for a third party. He's supporting detractors because of the Epstein files. I don't know. I don't know how else to explain it. I don't understand how better to align one with reality if they still cannot understand what the point of the entire Epstein conversation is. If we can rule out it's clearly not actually about protecting children, clearly not actually about the truth, clearly it is working out exactly as it is intended, which is to cause problems for Trump politically, divide Trump's base, and incite people to take up arms against Trump and his allies. That is what is happening. That is the point of this conversation.
And so we see him try to land the plane there, summarizing that the point of all of this is to turn people against Trump. And it kind of makes sense. He's been on the right for so many years. A big part of that is embracing conspiracy theories and blaming everyone else. And we clearly saw that as he consistently wanted to not blame the elites, but blame everyone else in every argument he made. He blamed the victims. He blamed the people who released the files. He blamed the people who wanted the files released and wanted accountability. He blamed everyone but the people who committed the actions in the files. But don't worry, he takes it even further as he makes the claim that Donald Trump is actively draining the swamp, while Howard Lutnick is standing next to him in the Oval Office, like someone who has been demonstrated to lie about his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein.
That's all what's going on, because you understand sort of the political project of Donald Trump, the mythology surrounding him, which is true, is that Donald Trump is a guy who's going to drain the swamp. He is going to actually align and orient the American political system with American voters. He's going to be the first guy to do this in decades. Literally, setting aside my own biases, how I may personally choose to interpret something in a more optimistic way, objectively, that is the case. Like, just objectively, that is what we have seen. Would I have liked to seen this play out a little bit quicker? Maybe even Trump 1.0, more expeditiously, Trump 2.0? Yes. We are not playing with action figures, though, so I can take what I'm given and I can evaluate it as such and think, okay, this is basically good.
So there you go. A guy on YouTube who blames minors who were sex trafficked on them believes that Donald Trump is draining the swamp. What do you think?